Alright, so, I'm Alex. Just your average, everyday delivery guy. Nothing too exciting, you know. Deliveries, traffic, the usual. But this one night, man, it was different. It was one of those nights that sticks with you, the kind where you look over your shoulder even when you're in your own house. It was pouring rain. Like, seriously pouring. The kind of rain that makes you wish you'd stayed in bed. My last stop was this old house way out in the sticks. You know the kind of place. Overgrown bushes, creaky old porch, the whole 9 yards. The address was weird, and the directions were kinda vague, but the cash was good, so I figured, why not? Pulling up, I got this uneasy feeling. The house looked deserted, like something out of a horror movie. It was one of those places that seemed to suck the light out of everything around it. I knocked. No answer. Figured I'd just leave the package on the porch. As I turned to go, a cold draft hit me, like someone had opened a freezer door. I shook it off, thinking it was just the wind. I was about to hop back in my van when I heard a noise from inside. Like a floorboard creaking or something. I froze. Maybe I imagined it. I was about to leave when I saw a shadow move past the upstairs window. I'm not talking about a normal shadow, like from a tree or something. This was a human-shaped shadow. My heart started pounding. I thought about just driving off, but the money was good. I took a picture with my phone just in case. The shadow disappeared. Maybe it was just someone up late, right? I mean, it's not like I saw a ghost or something. I got back in my van, shaking my head. As I was pulling away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. And there it was again, that same shadow. Only this time, it was at the front door. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I floored it, tires squealing. I didn't look back. I just drove and drove until I got home. I was shaking like a leaf. I checked my phone, and the picture was just a blurry shadow. Probably nothing, right? But I couldn't shake that feeling. Like something was really wrong with that house. I decided to call the non-emergency line. Told them about the creepy house, the shadow. They said they'd check it out. I don't know if they believed me, but they said they'd look into it. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I decided to do some online digging. I found old newspaper articles about the house. Apparently, it was an old Victorian mansion with a dark history. Something about a family tragedy, a disappearance. The articles were old, but the stories were creepy. I started to wonder if I'd seen a ghost or something. I mean, it sounds crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed possible. I started to get paranoid, checking every corner of my apartment, convinced I was going to see that shadow again. I know it sounds crazy, but I haven't been able to shake that feeling. Every time I see an old house, I think about that night. And I'm definitely more careful about late-night deliveries. You never know what you might find. The gas station was a dying breed, a relic of a time when road trips were adventures and not just a means to an end. Mine was one of those places, a lonely outpost on the edge of town, where the only company you got was the occasional lost traveler or the late-night trucker. It was the kind of place where the wind howled like a wounded animal and the rain lashed at the windows with a relentless fury, turning the world outside into a monochromatic blur. Tonight was one of those nights. The kind that seeped into your bones, a cold, clammy dread that clung to you like a wet coat. I was on the graveyard shift, a stretch of time that seemed to stretch on forever. The only sound was the incessant drumming of rain on the metal roof, a monotonous rhythm that began to feel like a heartbeat, a pulse of the lonely night. As the hours ticked by, the world outside seemed to shrink, and the gas station became its own isolated universe. The coffee was cold, the donuts stale, and the silence oppressive. It was in these moments of solitude that the mind began to play tricks on you. Shadows danced in the corners of your vision, and every creak and groan of the old building sounded like footsteps. Around 3 a.m., the first sign of life in hours. A car pulled into the lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin swords. A beat-up sedan, the kind you'd expect to find in a detective noir. A man emerged, tall and shrouded in a dark raincoat, his face obscured by the collar. There was something off about him, an aura of wrongness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. He filled up his tank, the pump's mechanical whirring breaking the eerie silence. As he paid, His eyes met mine, a cold, calculating stare that chilled me to the bone. There was something inhuman about them, a predatory glint that sent a shiver down my spine. He left without a word, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had appeared. It was as he drove away that I noticed it, a dark stain spreading across the pavement, growing larger with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest as realization dawned. Blood. The blood-curdling scream that ripped from my throat echoed in the empty night. I raced outside, the rain stinging my face. The man was gone, vanished into the darkness like a ghost. But there, on the cold, wet pavement, was the stark reality of violence. A woman, her body crumpled like a discarded doll, lay motionless in a growing pool of crimson. Fear, raw and primal, consumed me. I stumbled back inside, my mind racing. I had to call the police. I fumbled for the phone, my hands trembling like leaves in a storm. But as I dialed the numbers, the lights flickered and died, plunging the station into an inky blackness. Alone. That was the word that echoed in my mind. Alone in the darkness with the memory of what I had seen. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. And then, I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like nails on a chalkboard. It was coming from outside. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. Slowly, I reached for the baseball bat I kept behind the counter. My grip tightened around it as I strained to listen. The scratching grew louder, closer. And then, a shadow appeared at the window, a dark, menacing shape against the pale glow of the emergency lights. The door burst open, and a figure stepped into the dim light. It was the man from the car, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of rage. And in his hand, he held something that made my blood run cold. The old Harper High School was a behemoth of a building, a Gothic monstrosity that loomed over the neighborhood like a dark shadow. It had been abandoned for decades, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Local legends whispered of strange occurrences within its crumbling walls, tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena. But as a pizza delivery guy, I was more concerned about getting the job done and getting out alive. This particular delivery was different. The order was strange, a single large pizza, paid for in cash, with a specific request for extra cheese. The address was the old high school, a place most people avoided like the plague. But the money was good, so I shrugged and headed out. As I approached the school, a wave of unease washed over me. The building looked even more sinister in the twilight, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the soul. The wind howled through the shattered glass, creating an eerie symphony of mournful wails. I parked my car a safe distance away and grabbed the pizza. The walk to the school felt like an eternity. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and neglect. With each step, the building seemed to grow larger, more imposing. The entrance was a gaping maw, darkness yawning within. I hesitated, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. But the thought of the cash I'd earned pushed me forward. I stepped inside, the flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The interior was a labyrinth of deserted classrooms, the silence broken only by the echo of my footsteps. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. The place was a time capsule, frozen in the moment of abandonment. Desks were overturned, chairs piled high, and broken glass crunched underfoot. I found the room number on a piece of paper taped to a door. It was on the 3rd floor, a seemingly endless climb up a decaying staircase. As I reached the top, I paused to catch my breath. The room was at the end of the hall, a solitary beacon of light in a sea of darkness. The classroom was larger than I expected, with high ceilings and rows of old wooden desks. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. I placed the pizza on a desk and snapped a picture as proof of delivery. As I turned to leave, I heard a noise. A faint whisper, like the wind sighing through a graveyard. My heart pounded in my chest. Slowly, I turned around. The room was empty, just an ordinary, abandoned classroom. Or so I thought. As I reached for the doorknob, I felt a presence behind me. A cold dread washed over me. I spun around, my flashlight beam sweeping across the room. Nothing, just shadows and dust. But the feeling of being watched persisted. With a surge of adrenaline, I rushed out of the classroom and down the hallway. I could feel something, or someone, behind me. I ran, my feet pounding on the old wooden floor. I burst through the front doors and into the fresh air, my heart racing. I didn't look back. I just ran to my car and drove away as fast as I could. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing in one of the upper windows. A dark, shadowy figure that seemed to be watching me.